Hello and welcome to Blender Bite Size. In this video I'll be showing you how to make this material procedurally in Blender. Let's dive right into this one by showing you a quick look at the layout that I'm using. So I have a plane that I've created a backdrop with. I've got on a couple of objects which are going to reflect in the mirror. That'll help us see the effect. Got my camera pointing at the mirror. I've got my 3-point lighting all tracked to the mirror itself. And then I've got the mirror here. Now I've already done the frame and applied a material. I won't be showing you that here, but I am going to show you how to apply it to the piece of glass, essentially. And that's made up of a circle that's got a solidify modifier applied to it. So try using something solid and flat for this. So let's switch over to the shading tab where I've got my camera view already enabled and also the shading enabled. I'm using cycles and my GPU, and for the viewport I'm using 256 samples. For the final render I'll be going up to 4000 with some denoising, but you can of course do whatever you fancy. So let's make a start. I've got my circle selected. That's basically what I'm using for the mirror. Let's apply a new material and bring that over. Now I've got a principled BSDF already applied, plugged into a material output. Let's just shift that up a bit. And I'm going to need a second one of these anyway, so I'm going to duplicate that and drop it just here. I'm going to need a mix shader, so because I have got the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, I'm going to press Ctrl Shift and right click here and drag to there. There you go, and it automatically applies a mix shader and connects the two principled nodes to that. Now I'm going to create some texture using this factor, but first let's take a look at these. So for the first principled shader, I'm going to need a Musgrave texture. So Shift A, search for Musgrave. That's going to get plugged into the metallic slot of this shader. And for the subsurface method, I'm using Christensen Burley, and for the distribution, I'm using GGX. Let's change that on here as well while I'm at it. That takes away some of the settings elsewhere. So for the roughness, I'm going to go for 0.19. Everything else, leaving pretty much the same. For the Musgrave texture, leaving those two as they are, reducing the scale to 1, increasing the detail to 15, dimension 0, and the lacunarity to 1.5. So you can already see some of that mottling that you would get with an aged mirror happening here. But we need to have a little bit more control over that. So what we're going to do is press Ctrl T while we've got the Musgrave texture selected to apply a mapping and a texture coordinate node. If you haven't got the Node Wrangler add-on enabled, you can of course search for those and apply them individually. I'm going to use the object output from the texture coordinate to plug into the vector there. And on the scale for the mapping, I'm going to go for 0.6, 0.6 and 0 on the Z scale. Now we've got nothing to plug into this principled shader, so we're going to leave it as it is. What we are going to do though is get ourselves a color ramp. Let's plop it here and let's move the Musgrave texture back a bit, because we need to take that Musgrave texture and plug it into the color ramp. Now this branch of this tree is essentially going to become our factor to control what's happening here. Now, just before I do that, so we can continue to see exactly what's going on, I did say I've got nothing to plug in here, but we do need to increase the metallic value to 1, reduce the roughness to 0, and leave everything else as it is for now. So now we can start seeing that there is some reflection going on within this shape. In fact, if I increase the factor on the mix shader to 1, you can already see that it's totally metallic here, or totally reflective, and here we can see that texture. So we basically need to find a way of combining these two and using the factor as a mask. And that's what we're starting to do with the color ramp. Now, we're going to need a gradient texture to do that. And we're going to take the vector from the mapping node. And so that we can see what's going on, what I'm going to do is get my mix RGB node, pop it here, plug it into that factor, and take the color value from the gradient texture and plug it into color 1. Let's isolate that. So currently we've got the shading running across because we've got linear selected on the gradient texture. Let's change that to spherical. So now we can see we've got a much better thing there. But what we need to do is actually crunch that down so we get much harder gradation. So we're going to use a color ramp for that. We'll plug that in between the two. We're going to change the interpolation mode to ease. And we're going to set the white value in position 0.5. Let's change this mix value to darken. And now you can see it's getting much darker around the edges. Let's take the color value from this bottom color ramp and plug it into color 2. And again, we need to crunch it quite badly here. So let's go for constant on this one. And let's move this white value to 0.09. So now if I select this, you can see we've got good level of texture going on. We're just going to drop the value on the mix RGB node to 0.475. And in fact, actually, instead of darken, let's go for color burn. And now you can see where that texture is coming in. If we now switch back to the mix shader, you can see that we're perfectly reflective here, and then we've got the texture on the outside. Okay, so one last thing to do, I believe, which is on this very first principled shader, we're going to change the base color to a very dark value. Let's go all the way down. And what that's doing is softening the texture. So if I chuck that right back up, you can see we've got lots of white going on there, but we actually want to get rid of that. So we go right down, probably all the way to black, but what we could do is just increase that a little bit. Okay, so we've got something going on there. Our little objects that are reflected, though, don't have any materials, so we're going to give those something and just apply a little bit of colour, just so you can see better that there is an actual reflection going on. Let's choose another one and just give it a different colour. So there you can see we've got the reflection of the things within the scene. We've got the texture running around the outside, which we can control. Let's see what the different things do. So if we get this mix RGB and change the values, you can see that there is like a defining line that basically brings it in and sharpens it off. So this is basically creating the circular aperture that's working as a mask to introduce that texture. So if you drag it out all the way till it's roughly towards the edge of that circular object, which is 0.192, you get a very, very soft result. You bring it up a bit, you get much more definition around the edge of the mirror. So it's whatever your preference on that one. With this colour value, then you get a thinner line of aging. You can obviously bring that all the way in if you want a very old knackered mirror. With this colour ramp, you're basically controlling... I've totally forgotten. Back up. You're just controlling a little bit of the density within that texture. And then with the Musgrave, you're controlling the detail on the texture. So the lower the value, the sort of slightly more smoky effect that you get. Dropping the value on the base color on the second principled shader basically controls the level of reflection, or the light that's reflected. So actually taking it down a bit really does help give you a more realistic effect. I've already explained about that base color. The metallic is controlled here by the Musgrave texture, and that's basically the metallic on this ring of texture. And you need that value in order to still have reflection going on within that area. And I think that's about it. Let's just have a look and see. So this scale value here controls the overall placement of the aging. Anyway, I'll stop mucking around now. That basically is your aged mirror effect. So let's send that to render and see what we get. And there we go. There's your aged mirror procedural material. Hope you enjoy this one. Please do remember to give the video a thumbs up before you go. And of course, if you'd like to see more from me in the future, please make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for notifications. Thanks for watching.